Good afternoon, everybody. It is indeed a privilege and a pleasure to be one of the co-organizers of this webinar. And I'm indeed proud to have brought together such an exquisite team of experts. I would like to take a moment and introduce all the members of the panel. Starting with Professor Abdu Adam. He's a professor in the Department of Pharmacology and Therapeutics. Same applies to Professor Constantin Ovidiu Baltatu, a professor in the same department. In addition to their faculty positions, they have high-ranking administrative duties at assistant dean level. We also have the pleasure of having Dr. Eman Al-Fishat. She's an associate professor in the pharmacology department, as well as Mrs. Alun Lujain, senior instructor in our department. We also borrowed, so to speak, to give a little bit more flavor to the panel. We have Dr. Anura, a member in the Department of Epidemiology, and she graciously agreed to come and support us today. And actually, not only to support us today, she's a continuous support in our activities, and we are delighted to having her. As to myself, I'm the chair of the department, professor of pharmacology and therapeutics, and the associate dean for research at Khalifa University, College of Medicine and Health Sciences. Again, thank you so much to all participants. Thank you to the administration for organizing this superb event. And without wasting any more time, let's get going. For those of you who do not recognize me instantly, the picture, it's me a couple of years ago. So time leaves some traces even on the youngest of us. The topic of the day is vaccines, more specifically COVID vaccines, serving the world and saving the world. And when I agreed to co-host this event, I must confess that to a certain degree, the topic was theoretical. I had the privilege of being one of the very first to be vaccinated in the United Arab Emirates. I started my vaccination cycle at some point in October, and on the 3rd of November 2020, I had both COVID vaccines behind me. With this protection in place, I was testing for COVID every 14 days. Participated, of course, downloaded the app and gained with the app entrance to university, light showing up green. So in theory, everything was fabulous until probably 10 days ago, when suddenly I tested positive. And the whole COVID vaccination, treatment, precautionary activities became or gained a totally different value. I must, looking back at the last 6 months, I must clearly state that for me and for many of our expats and nationals, there is no better place on earth to be in these difficult COVID times than in the Emirates. There is no other country in the world doing so much for its citizens and guests as the United Arab Emirates. The amount of money and energy invested in protecting the population is beyond imagination. Compared with friends in the United States, compared with friends in the United Kingdom, compared with friends in Germany or any other country you can think of, nobody else in the world is so well protected as we are here. And I would like to start today's session by expressing my deepest gratitude to the leadership of the country for all the financial and otherwise effort put into protecting the population. I even dare to say that without the COVID vaccine I received, probably me turning positive would have been a much more dramatic experience. Having said that, again, thank you so much to all participants. And it's indeed a pleasure and a privilege to ask Dr. Noura to give us an overview on the epidemiology of COVID-19.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Petroianu. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. This is Dr. Noura Al-Hajri, member of the Department of Epidemiology and Public Health, and I'm happy to cover today the epidemiology of COVID-19 and overview of the vaccine development. Next slide. About once in every generation, a global pandemic emerges and wreaks a havoc on a vulnerable population. This is why almost most of us, if not everybody, have very little information to know almost no information about how to deal with such events. As of February 10, 2021, the total number of global cases of COVID-19 have been 106,947,844 positive COVID cases. And as of February 10, 2021, there has been a total of 2,358,038 death cases that has been attributed to COVID-19 only. While in the United Arab Emirates, as of yesterday, February 10, 2021, there was only 332,603 positive COVID cases and a total of 18,596 active COVID cases. It is interesting to highlight that since the start of the pandemic till today, there has been only 947 death cases attributed to COVID-19. This reflects the substantial efforts that the United Arab Emirates have put together to combat and fight the spread and dispersion of COVID-19 virus. The data that we have here on the map is a compilation of data that have been taken from government all over around the world, part of a project called Our World Data Project, an initiative that has been started by the University of Oxford. And before I move on and explain more about the data in this map, I would like to highlight the differences between a vaccinated individual and a fully vaccinated individual. So the term for a vaccinated individual refers to the individual who received at least one dose of the COVID-19 vaccine, while a fully vaccinated person refers to someone who have completed his COVID-19 vaccine doses to the full. What we see here on the map, interestingly, is that the United Arab Emirates and Israel are two countries among the highest vaccination rates in the world. As a matter of fact, the United Arab Emirates is ranked #1 in the global vaccine race, and it's vaccinating its population faster than any other country in the world, with a rate of 42.2% of the entire population receiving the first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. Now, this percentage is higher than any other country in the world. As it's seen here, it is higher than Israel, that has a proportion or a percentage of 39.2% of its total population receiving the initial or the first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. It is also higher than United Kingdom, that has a percentage of 18.1% of its total population being vaccinated. And it's even higher than the United States, that has a total percentage of 9.7% of its total population being vaccinated. Interestingly as well to mention is that the United Arab Emirates is the second in the world to be among the countries to fully vaccinate its population, with a proportion of 44.6 per 100 people being fully vaccinated. Now, as you can see that this proportion is still higher than many countries in the world. It is higher than the United Kingdom that has a proportion of 18.8 per 100 people, and it's even higher than the United States that has a proportion of 12.8 per 100 people being fully vaccinated. Now, this highlights the impressive achievements and the efforts that the United Arab Emirates have put together to combat and to fight the dispersion and the spread of the COVID-19 virus in its nation. Now, vaccine development usually takes several years and takes a long time to develop a vaccine, and takes numerous number of tests to produce one. However, in 2020, the scientists embarked on a global vaccine race. And I'm happy to share today that so far we have 20 vaccines that have made it to phase 3 trials. Now, this is considered a huge achievement in this remarkable short amount of time in comparison to what's done in the past. Interestingly, to point out as well that so far we have 6 vaccines that has been authorized for emergency and early use in several continents around the world. We also have 4 vaccines that have been fully approved for usage in different countries around the world. To continue what we've just explained, this is a list of all the vaccines that are being developed or under development out there in the market. So we have the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine that is being developed by a collaboration between the United States and Germany. Currently, it is in phase 2 and combined phase 2 and phase 3 trials. And it has been approved for usage in Bahrain, Saudi, Switzerland, and emergency uses in the United States and in the European countries. Furthermore, we have Moderna vaccine that has been developed by the United States, and it's currently in phase 3 human clinical trials, and it's being approved in Switzerland and several US states and different European countries. Moreover, we have the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine that is currently in the combined phase 2, phase 3 of the human clinical trials, and it's being used for emergency usages in the United Kingdom and the European countries. Lastly, we have the Sinopharm vaccine that has been developed by a collaboration between the United Arab Emirates and the Chinese, and it's currently in phase 3 trials and has been approved for usage in different countries such as Bahrain, Saudi, Al Emirat, and different other continents around the world. So vaccine developments. Before the vaccine goes out there to the market, before it reaches us in the public, it goes through several stages of testing to make sure that this vaccine is safe and it's efficient to be used and to produce sufficient immune response. So before it's being tested on a human, it gets tested on animals. That is known as stage 0, or the preclinical testing, in which the developed vaccine in the lab gets tested on animals such as monkeys and mice. They check for its safety, they check for its ability to elicit an immune response, and if it's successful, it moves on to stage 1 of safety clinical trials that are done on human volunteers. So in this phase, or in stage 1 of the human trials, they check the vaccine for its safety in the human. They check the vaccine for its ability to produce an immune response within a human system. Once it succeeds, it moves on to phase 2. The vaccine is being tested on a small group of volunteers, up to several hundreds of volunteers. And again, they check for the adverse outcomes of that vaccine, the possible side effects, and its ability to protect against the infection. Moving on to stage 3, which is known as well as the efficacy trials, in which the vaccine gets tested on thousands and thousands of volunteers that receive the COVID vaccine, and then they check for the outcomes and compare them to a second group of volunteers that do not receive the vaccine, or a group of volunteers that receive a placebo vaccine, which is known as a substance that has no therapeutic outcomes and no therapeutic effects. Then they compare between the outcomes between the two groups, and they they see if the vaccine has better protective outcomes and better efficacy and ability to produce an immune response and protect the individuals from the infection. Moving on to stage 4, which is known as the post-marketing surveillance, in which that they follow those individuals that were vaccinated for a long time to see the risk of adverse effects and adverse side effects that are being developed and attributed to that vaccine. So I trust that my colleagues who are experts in pharmacology and vaccine development will be covering in details and depth about the vaccine types. However, I will briefly touch on the different types of the COVID-19 vaccine that we have. So we have the genetic vaccine, we have the viral vector vaccines, we have the protein-based vaccine. Lastly, we have the inactivated or the killed vaccine. And I trust that my colleagues from the Department of Pharmacology will deliver a great presentation about each type and each category of the vaccine. And lastly, before I leave you today, I just wanted to share my message with you. Always choose to vaccinate. Choose to protect yourself, choose to protect your family, and choose to protect your loved ones. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Noura, for this superb overview, emphasizing the leading role the United Arab Emirates is playing in the world in the fight against COVID. And again, thank you for reinforcing the message that vaccination, it's one of the pillars of protection, both on individual level and population level. Having said that, our next speaker is Professor Abdou Adem from the Department of Pharmacology, and he will give us an overview about the Sinopharm vaccine, which is one of the first COVID-19 vaccines to become available. Professor Adem, floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor George. I will give a short presentation on the Sinopharm vaccine. As you know today, the coronavirus disease 2019, or as it's called COVID-19 pandemic, is creating havoc in the world and threatens global public health. As of February 9, there have been 107.6 million coronavirus cases in the world, around 79.5 million recovered, and more than 2.3 million deaths. As we speak today, there are more than 25.6 million active cases. The UAE has also its fair share of this pandemic. Also, as of February 9th, on the date, we had 3,310 cases, about 3,368 recovered cases, and on that day we had 17 deaths. The overall, the country coronavirus tally now stands, as Dr. Noura has already mentioned, at 332,603 cases, and out of those, 313,060 have recovered, and we have a death of 947, as was mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. And this is despite the extreme, rules and regulations which the United Arab Emirates is trying to impose to fight the coronavirus spreading. It's one of the countries which is having the highest level of tests of coronaviruses. The UAE has more than 27 million conducted tests for coronavirus, and daily tests of around 165,796. Despite that, these efforts, there are still active cases. As we speak today, there are more than 18,000 active cases in the country. The virus which is causing this havoc is a SARS-CoV-2 virus. This is a positive sense single-stranded RNA virus. And as you can see in the virus, there are all this parts of the virus which are protruding outside, and when this virus infects human beings, the pathogen, and this pathogen will the body cells will try to identify these antigens, like these proteins which are protruding outside, and then they will produce antibodies and try to fight the disease. This virus goes into the body, and once it's inside the body, it binds to the angiotensin receptor enzyme 2, which is found in different cells, and by binding to this receptor, it gets into the cells, and there it will replicate inside the cells and will infect or cause a disease. As we speak today, there isn't an effective antiviral drug to talk of. There are several drugs which have been tried and tested, and some are having some effect, but overall, we don't have an effective antiviral drug against COVID-19. So therefore, back in 2020, people thought it would be a good idea to have vaccines with good potency and safety, which will cause better immunity for the population. The vaccine I'm talking about today is a Sinopharm COVID-19 vaccine, which was developed by the United Arab Emirates and China. And this vaccine is an inactivated virus vaccine, which means the whole virus is inactivated and is used as a vaccine. So what is vaccination then? Vaccination, this is the safest way to protect against an infectious disease. Once you have been vaccinated, you should have the ability to fight off the infection if you come into contact with the virus. So how does these vaccines work? The vaccines usually train your immune system using a harmless form of the virus, either, as I said, in the Sinopharm vaccine, which is an activated virus, or a piece of the virus, like the S protein, which I showed you earlier, could be used, and this will activate your immune response. By itself, the inactivated virus or the piece of the virus will not cause the disease, and therefore your immune cells, the beta cells and T cells, the beta cells will produce antibodies against this specific target, and then by doing so, it will fight the invading virus. So when the real virus invades the person, then these cells will have a memory, immune memory, and they will remember and try to fight the virus. So this is on the individual basis. It protects the person on the individual basis, but it's more than that. When you do, if we look at the panel on the picture on the right, you will see that in a community, if people, not too many people are vaccinated, then if there is one person who gets infected, that person will spread the disease throughout the community. However, if you have a lot of people in the community who are vaccinated, then the infected person will not be able to infect a lot of people and cannot spread the disease. And this is called herd immunity, and this is very important, particularly crucial for protecting individuals who are unable to receive vaccines, such as those that are too young, or people which are undergoing certain treatments, like in case of terminal diseases, like cancer and so on. So what is in a vaccine? That we have talked now about the benefits. The vaccine, like many other drugs, contains a lot of constituents. The most important is the active ingredient. As I mentioned, in the case of our vaccine, the Sinopharm vaccine is an inactivated virus, or it could be a piece of a virus and so on. In addition to that, we have adjuvants. In some cases, adjuvants are needed or not, and these adjuvants, they will create a stronger immune response to the vaccine. We have also preservatives and stabilizers, like many other drugs, and also in food processing. So these preservatives and stabilizers will maintain the vaccine qualities, safe storage, and also they prevent from contamination. And there are some residual traces during the manufacture of the vaccine, but these are very, very minor things which are not really things that are only counted parts per billion and so on. And then water, which is the main ingredient, of course. So the Sinopharm vaccine, which I'm talking about today, this is a vaccine which is made of inactivated viruses. The viruses are inactivated by a chemical called beta-propionolactone, and this was a virus which was taken from a patient hospitalized in Wuhan in China. The strain is the HB02. So phase 1 and phase 2 studies were done in China. In phase 1 study, they recruited around 192 subjects, and they found where there also been people above age of 60, and there were no serious adverse effects were reported. In phase 2, the participants, 448 subjects were involved, and this study showed a more promising immunogenicity with over 100% seroconversion was achieved, which shows is very excellent. Next slide, please. So the Sinopharm COVID vaccine, the phase 3 study was done in the UAE in collaboration with the UAE, and the Ministry of Health and Prevention reported the results as 86% efficiency against COVID-19 infection, 99% seroconversion rate of neutralizing antibody, 100% effectiveness in preventing moderate and severe cases of the disease, and also there weren't any serious side effects. And based on these positive results of the phase 3, on December 9, 2020, the Ministry of Health and Prevention of the UAE announced officially that it has registered this Beijing Institute of Biological Products inactivated vaccine, known as the Sinopharm vaccine. And this was the first vaccine that was registered in the country, and many people have been vaccinated with this vaccine. And today also many places, many of the Emirates, the Sinopharm vaccine is still used, especially in Abu Dhabi and others. But also in some Emirates, we have there are other vaccines which have come in. So in conclusion, I would like to say that the vaccine is safe, the vaccine is effective, the vaccine is free for citizens and residents in the UAE. I got my COVID-19 vaccine, and I'm happy with that. My suggestion to everybody is get vaccinated, and get vaccinated. By getting vaccinated, you are not only protecting yourself, but you are also protecting the most vulnerable in your community. And finally, next slide, I would like to leave you with this slide. To choose to vaccinate, to protect yourself and your community against COVID-19, please choose to vaccinate. Choose to vaccinate. Choose to vaccinate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Adam, for this overview. Of course, we cannot state often enough the importance of vaccination, whether using this vaccine or any other of the available vaccines. But we have to remind ourselves and the community that in the fight against COVID, vaccination is only one of the pillars available. There is, of course, the isolation, vaccination, and treatment. And of course, vaccination is an absolutely essential component of this triad. The other ones, the isolation, self-isolation, and treatment, if needed, of equal importance as well. Again, thank you so much for your presentation, and with Lujane's help, we will hear from Professor Baltato about the Pfizer-BioNTech European Superstar vaccine.
Yes, hello everybody. I'm Ovidiu Baltato, vaccinated. Today I will speak about Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. On 5th of January 2021, the World Health Organization lists Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine for emergency use. This emergency use listing will now allow UNICEF and Pan American Health Organization to procure the vaccine for distribution to countries in need. Here we can see how the vaccine works, the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. It's an mRNA vaccine, which gives the immune system genetic instructions to recognize a virus. So in this case, the scientists are focusing on the genetic sequence of the virus, which is the spike protein. This is used to synthesize an mRNA sequence, and these instructions that cells can use to make a spike protein. The mRNA lipid, it's surrounded in a nanoparticle, and this synthetic mRNA is packaged in this nanoparticle that deliver the instructions to a cell. So this nanoparticle will allow the mRNA to enter the cell, and once inside the cell, its cellular machinery follows the mRNA instructions to produce the viral protein. This is displayed on the surface of the cell and stimulates an immune system response, what we need in order to protect ourselves from the real virus. The effectiveness of the vaccines. Here we have a comparison with many other vaccines. And of course, that as the flu vaccine's effectiveness varies significantly over the time, figure is an average of the past 10 years. Obviously, we don't have the average for the Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine, as we did not get 10 years of experience. For the Pfizer vaccine, as for the other vaccines, we need 2 doses in order to get the full immunity. On day 1, we have the first vaccine dose, and on day 12, we start to build the immunity. In the 21st day, we will get the second dose of vaccine, and only at the day 28, we will develop the full immunity in order to be protected. Will it offer a lasting protection? That's one of the questions. It's impossible to know, and we will find out only by waiting. If immunity does not last, then it may be necessary to have annual vaccines, as we do normally for flu. The vaccine appears to protect 94% of adults over 65 years old, and data from its phase 3 trial suggests it works equally well in people of all ages and ethnicities. The next question is, could the vaccine have long-term side effects? As many asked, since it is an mRNA vaccine. Nothing in medicine is 100% safe. Even something we take without thinking, like paracetamol, poses risks. The data so far is reassuring. Trials on 43,500 people discovered no safety concerns, although mild side effects such as headaches and muscle aches have been reported. Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine works against mutations found in UK, South Africa variants, lab study finds. The results, while preliminary and not peer-reviewed yet, are the latest to suggest that vaccines can protect against the strains. Nevertheless, we must stress the importance of the knowledge that we need to share that viruses, they develop mutations. The COVID-19 Pfizer vaccine gives us some logistical challenges in order to get it on site. It must be kept at a -70 degrees Celsius during the transportations. The jab must be thawed before it's given to a patient, obviously, and it can be stored in a normal fridge for a few days before being used. In this slide, you can see that the transportation through the airplane reaches the place, and then it's transported via a truck to the vaccination center in order to be delivered on site and administered to beneficiaries. Again, protect yourself against COVID-19. Choose to vaccinate. I'm vaccinated. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ovidio. As always, a pleasure to listen to you, and it's very important to be reminded what logistical problems the provision of such a vaccine causes. An uninterrupted chain of -80 degrees from manufacturer essentially to the point of delivery. It's essentially a nightmare to create, and nevertheless it was created, and UAE is one of the first countries in the world to offer it. Again, thank you so much. Lujane, next speaker. Having said that, Lujane, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. George. So I'll be talking about the Moderna mRNA 1273 vaccine. So well known as the Moderna vaccine. So Moderna vaccine is, or the Moderna company is an American biotech company that's based in Cambridge. Back in 2020, the Moderna collaborated with Lonza to produce around 1 billion doses per year. Looking here up at what happened, how did this vaccine get developed? So the successful story started back in January 2020, and that's where the sequence for mRNA 1273 against the novel coronavirus was finalized. And then in March 2020, the first participant in the phase 1 study was dosed, followed by very good announcement of very good positive data from phase 1 in May 2020. And finally, and in June 2020, the phase 2 was initiated, and completed enrollment in younger adults was done. And finally, in July 27, 2020, phase 3 was initiated with approximately 30,000 subjects. So this was a great success for this vaccine, and followed by, in November 2020, the primary efficacy analysis of phase 3 was approximately around 94%. So here the idea of the slide is for us to appreciate the fact that this vaccine has went through the regular phases, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, as explained by Dr. Noura. So it's gone through the same regular phases of any vaccine or drug development. However, it's done on a faster pace because of the situation that we're in, the pandemic situation that we're facing. And luckily, in December 18, 2020, the Moderna vaccine received the FDA emergency use authorization, and in January 6, 2020, it was granted the European Medicine Agency conditional marketing authorization. So how does this Moderna vaccine work? So it's simply an mRNA vaccine, or mRNA vaccine, same as the Pfizer vaccine explained by my colleague, Dr. Ovidio. So mRNA is simply a part of the virus genetic code. So this mRNA will get injected into the body of patients, and the body will produce this spike protein of the virus. So what is the spike protein? It's a protein available on the surface of the virus, in which the virus uses it to enter the human cells. So now, once the patient is vaccinated, the body will be able to, or the immune system will be able to produce antibodies and T cells against that specific spike protein of the COVID-19 virus. And in that way, the body is ready to fight the virus in the future. It's already encountered the spike protein, not the whole virus, just only the spike protein, and it's ready to fight the virus in the future. So even if you encounter the virus in the future, the clinical course will be much milder if you receive the vaccine. So now, how is both Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine are mRNA vaccines. So how are they different and how are they similar? So as we said, both mRNA, both of them are given as in 2 doses, and they are of up to 95% efficacy. So the differences are that in Pfizer, there are 2 injections given 21 days apart, while in Moderna, there are 2 injections given a month apart. Dr. Ovidio concluded that the problem with the Pfizer vaccine is that it's the storage, that it needs around -70 storage during transportation. And that's actually the very important difference and added benefit of Moderna. It's that it's stored in -20 degrees Celsius up to 6 months. On the other hand, the cost of Moderna is a bit higher than Pfizer. So these are the differences between Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. How effective is the Moderna vaccine? It's, as I said, it's almost the reported efficacy until now, from the primary analysis of phase 2, it's 94% approximately. Does it work against the new strain? Until now, it appears to work against the new, more infectious variants of the pandemic virus. And do we know how much does it last, the immunity? We are not sure. It persists for several months. However, the full duration is not yet known. And also, I'd like to say and add to what my colleague Dr. Ovidio mentioned, is the Moderna vaccine safe? So, or same as the Pfizer vaccine. So really here, these side effects are very mild, just pain, tenderness, swelling and redness, and general side effects like fatigue, headache, muscle pain, joint pain, and so on. Of course, these side effects are more common after the second immunization, and there's a distant chance of a severe allergic reaction within few minutes to 1 hour of taking the vaccine. As for the long-term effects, we are not really sure because this is a new vaccine, but these are the reported side effects until today. And finally, I would like to join my colleagues and encourage every person to get vaccinated to protect yourself, your loved ones, and the community in general. Please choose to vaccinate. I am vaccinated. Thank you very much.
So, Dr. Jane, thank you so much for your presentation. Pleasure to listening to. The final speaker in this round is Dr. Eman, and she will try to answer most commonly asked questions. Dr. Eman, floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. George, and hi everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. And the aim of this part of the presentation is to answer the most commonly asked questions and set the floor for your questions. So we will start with who's eligible, and that's one of the most commonly asked questions. And the straightforward answer would be any adult 18 years of age or above with no contraindication for the vaccine, and contraindications for the vaccine having an autoimmune disease, having a certain sensitivity or allergy to vaccines components. So you will find out there questions about would patients with chronic diseases be eligible for the vaccine, and the answer is yes, unless their clinician states that there is a contraindication for that. Yeah, so what to expect after getting vaccinated is one of the important questions out there. And as any vaccination, you would expect to have some tenderness, redness, some pain at the site of injection, And there are some other side effects that you can experience, like heaviness in the arm. All these, most of these side effects are very mild, and they will be sorted within 2 to 7 days maximum. So the next question, can I still pass on COVID-19? And that's a very important question. And there's a question related to this as well. Can I get COVID-19? And they are very related to each other. So as my colleagues explained, so they said that they describe different types of vaccines, right? And most of these vaccines are either proteins, parts of this virus, for example, the Pfizer and the Moderna one. So we're giving the proteins, the mRNA that encodes that spike protein. And it's like giving you 4 wheels and you're asking me, would I get the car after these 4 wheels? Sorry. So if I give you 4 wheels, you will have 4 wheels. There's no way to get the car, and the disease here being the car. So you will not get COVID-19 from the vaccine. And the other question, so would you get infected after vaccination? And the answer is yes, you might be infected. So the vaccines has been developed. Yes, Dr. Georg is stating that he's a living example for that. And this is when people are really confused. And this is when people start to say, oh, the vaccine doesn't work then. Well, when the vaccine was developed and the efficacy has been tested for stopping the disease, not the infection. Now, what's the difference? So stopping the disease means that you get the infection with the actual virus, and then you will not be hospitalized, for example. You will not suffer from severe symptoms. You will not be sick, basically. So the vaccines are out there. They are tested to stop the disease, but they are not tested to stop the infection. And so we might have some data by the end of this year on whether these vaccines will stop the infection or not. So we will see the number of cases, the number of vaccinated people, and we will test for that. But the vaccine will stop the disease, stop you being sick, hospitalized, getting the severe form of the infection. But it will not, we don't have evidence saying that it will stop the infection. It might. Now, having said that, this will mean you as a vaccinated individual might get the infection. And you might know, and you might not know. If you get infected and you get symptoms, this is the way you will know that you got COVID-19 after being vaccinated, because you had symptoms, you go and test, and you would know that you have the infection. Many of patients, they will, especially the vaccinated one, because you are prepared, because the vaccine prepared your immune system, you will not even know that you are infected. So they will have no symptoms at all. So this is the dangerous thing, is to take the vaccination as an excuse to put our masks away, to forget about social distancing, and that's really gonna put other lives on the stake. So please be aware that having the vaccine does not mean that this is the time to put our masks away. So yes, you can still pass on COVID-19 after vaccination. Now, compatibility between vaccines. You can see people asking about, oh, I took this vaccine, can I take the second dose from another vaccine? And the jury is still out, and we don't really have an answer for this. We know that last month we had a new study coming out testing one of these vaccines, given 1 dose of one vaccine, and then following that up after 28 days with another dose from another vaccine. And that was in animals, and the results were very promising, but it's still really way too early to say that, and we will wait for an official recommendation with this regard. Now, there are 2 most frequently circulated myths about the vaccine. And these are the first one, especially about the Moderna and the Pfizer one, is the genetic mutation. The next slide, please. So gene mutations, you will see in social media, you will see out there that they're talking about this being an mRNA vaccine. This will mean that we will get gene mutations because we have taken this vaccine. And this has definitely no scientific evidence whatsoever. There are no studies with this regard, and there are no evidence reported with this regard. In fact, having mRNA vaccines has its own advantages, because we now know that the virus is very clever, and we are experiencing many mutations in these viruses. And having mRNA viruses written like you write the mRNA with letters, so this will make these vaccines very adaptable, in fact. And you can change these vaccines and adapt them to the changing clever virus. And when people talk about these vaccines, they normally think that they are very, very new vaccines. We don't know anything about them. In fact, when you dig into it, you will see that they've been there and they've been studied for more than a decade. It started with Ebola and cancer vaccines, and they studied it extensively, but we haven't been using these before, because with Ebola, it wasn't the size of the pandemic wasn't like the size of COVID-19. Another myth connects the vaccines with infertility. And the reason behind that, so if you do dig into this one, you will find some articles talking about the protein, the spike protein. There is some kind of homology of this protein with a protein found in the placenta. And in fact, if you think about this even more, and when scientists reported this, they talked about it in the sense, this make you decide even more to take the vaccine, because if the virus can attack these tissues, then you better protect yourself against this virus. If the actual virus will get there, it will even do more harm. So this has been verified scientifically, and this has been disregarded by scientists. So we know that there are a lot of things we don't know about these vaccines. And we know that definitely we need more studies. And the pace that these vaccines were developed, definitely not the normal pace, but not because we skipped. You saw with my colleagues that we followed the same pattern we used to follow when we developed all the other vaccines. It's just the governments have put all the efforts together with the pharmaceutical companies. They had to invest. The whole world came together to develop these vaccines because we needed them. Yeah, so I want to just summarize all what I talked about by saying that there are two aims for the vaccines. The first one that we all know is that to protect ourselves, right? To prepare our immune system, so when we get the actual infection, we will be ready. And you will find some people argue with that and say that the disease is mild, I can beat it, my immunity has nothing wrong with it, I will leave it to the natural course of events. And that is so it's an underestimation for the size of the disease. So we're dealing with COVID-19 with its acute phase and the aftermath of it, which we know nothing about, we don't know enough about. Now there are a lot of studies say that this disease is very nasty and it has very much long-term consequences than we can estimate. So this is one thing. Another thing, the aim of the vaccines is to stop the disease, not only to protect you, is to stop the disease. We all wish to go back to normality. We all wish to go to visit our loved ones. We all wish to we really grieved over the loss of our loved ones for this disease. So the only way to stop the disease is by vaccination. So we have done that with smallpox. We have done that from other diseases. We have done that for polio. We eliminated these diseases. And this is how we can beat that COVID-19. And now we have the light is there at the end of the tunnel. And instead of counting these cases, now we will be counting the number of people vaccinated, the number of people being protected. So if we go through this link, so Lujain, can you help us with the link? If we open this link and instead of counting the number of deaths and the number of cases, now we will start to count the number of people protected, the number of people who are in a better place. So this is the number of people that have been given vaccine doses. So the number of doses. So we have more than 157 million doses has been given worldwide. And if you go, please, Lujain, for the next slide and open the next link, we will see how many of these vaccine doses has been given in the Emirates. And Dr. Noura has stated how the Emirates is ranked number one at the rate of vaccines. So this is something we are all proud and thankful for. So this is the number of vaccine doses that has been given in the Emirates, and this is updated. So this is really the light at the end of the tunnel that we've been waiting for, and this is how we will beat the disease. So please get vaccinated, and let's beat and conquer COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ayman, for trying to answer the so-called frequently asked questions. There is no doubt in my mind and in the scientific community that refusing to take the vaccine is playing Russian roulette with your life. And I want to repeat this sentence. It's playing Russian roulette with your life. It's beyond the ability of the imagination of the people to figure out what a complex and cruel disease COVID-19 infection is. The destruction inflicted by this virus in the lungs and in many other organs, it's beyond imagination. Having the privilege, so to speak, to be one of the few vaccinated and then double positive tested, I can tell you that on a daily basis, I take at the moment about 28 tablets of various drugs, and some of them not really benign, antivirals, spike protein proteases, but also drugs to influence the blood clotting. And one of the issues I would like to highlight here is that it's aspirin. It's not the drug to stop your from becoming deep venous thrombosis. I received during the hospitalization phase daily my SC heparin, and now I'm receiving the direct thrombin inhibitors, the rivaroxaban, and all these drugs, if you sit down and add together, add to thousands and thousands of dirhams on a daily basis. So it's not only the vaccine, it's the treatment if one turns positive, which is a huge financial burden for the country, and the gratitude for what the government is doing is endless. Having said that, one final question, because the questions are pouring in, and we will try to answer most of them in writing, but before we finish this session, one of the questions which came in is, how do you define recovery from an infection? And I think Dr. Ayman used the word recovery, and Dr. Abdo used the word recovery, and maybe other speakers as well. So what is recovery from COVID vaccine infection? Anybody daring to suggest an answer?
The recovery of from COVID-19, Dr. George?
Yes, how do you define recovery?
So they defined it to 3 phases. So we have the acute phase, and we have the post-acute phase, which lasts to 3 weeks after the infection. And then from that onwards, you're talking about the chronic phase of COVID-19. So some patients will not experience except for the acute case, phase, sorry. And then some other patients will not even experience the acute phase. So, but this is the timeline for it. So acute phase, and then post-acute phase, and then the chronic consequences of COVID-19 or the long-term effects. So it depends on the individual. So it depends on the patient, whether that patient had a severe infection or not. This would define his timeline of recovery. And recovery means that you go back to, so it's based on points scored by each patient, so that his clinician will ask, return back where you started before COVID-19. So your daily activities, your capabilities, your abilities, your all your life goes back to where it was before COVID-19. Lung function, they do it, they assess the three main organs, the heart, the lung, and the brain. So cognitive impairment has been reported, and many patients recovered from COVID-19 without that, but some small percentage of patients, they had some cognitive impairment reported. So it's an assessment for the three main affected organs, and this is the timeline for recovery.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rahman. But in the best interest of the audience, what you're talking about, it's clinical recovery. Am I COVID virus free? It's my virus load 0. So if you do your PCR on me and run 99 million cycles, am I negative? The reason why I'm asking that, because in Germany, they don't test for COVID post-infection.
Yeah.
Exactly for this reason.
Anyone else wants to take this question, or?
I'm sure they're queuing up.
Okay, so Dr. George, they don't test for, because what we realized after testing patients after their infection, those patients will test positive, and some of these patients tested positive for more than 3 months. But this has nothing to do with the infectivity of the virus. So the virus is there, but it's not infective. So it cannot potentially cause an infection. So that's why they stopped testing for that. That's based on what I read. If you have anyone has any other opinions, please go ahead.
Epidemiological views on that?
So I agree with much of what Iman has mentioned. So when a virus or when the PCR tests positive, even like few months after the person being symptom-free or subclinical or being asymptomatic, it's most probably because of the presence of the viral debris. So that's what's being caught by the PCR rather than the presence of a live virus. It's rather the presence of a viral debris. So that's why some of them may test positive. Furthermore, I want to highlight that the sensitivity and specificity of the PCR test is not 100%. As far as I remember, that the specificity was around 94% and the sensitivity was somewhere in the 70s. So this tells us that the PCR is not the best test to rule out the disease due to its low sensitivity compared to its specificity. That's what I have from my side.
Again, thank you so much to all panel members. I learned a lot, both by listening to you and by becoming positive. It's an eye-opening experience in the purer sense of the word. I truly appreciate, and I'm sure we will be working on answering the endless number of questions which are coming our way. Again, thank you so much, Khalifa administration, for making this event possible. Thank you, departments involved, and thank you everybody who attended. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.